Oh, hey. Let's talk about TB-500. You guys know this peptide, I think predominantly because people talk about it in the context of like anabolism and repairing muscles, really sort of facilitating the healing of muscles while you're in an ongoing workout routine. We usually group TB-500 in the context of reparative peptides, similar to BPC-157, but ultimately it has a lot different mechanisms, and I sort of group it in a much different category. I wouldn't call it like comparable or in the same category as Cialis or tadalafil, but it is a pro-erectogenic peptide. I think where TB-500 really shines is in optimizing the thin lining of the blood vessels called the endothelium, as well as upregulating things like vascular endothelial growth factor, which in terms of erection quality significantly increase erection quality. I mean, the endothelium is pretty important, and specifically endothelial nitric oxide synthase, the enzyme that catalyzes nitric oxide to facilitate erections as it relates to erections. So what I'm going to do in this video is break down how actually TB-500 may be able to restore people's erections from downed states, and how it's a pretty epic compound for the optimization of sexual function, and specifically erections for guys on androgens, not on androgens, on HCG monotherapy, whatever it is. TB-500 you should give a go for fixing erection quality. And I've got some data to prove it. All right, before we get started, look, Cortex Labs is a TRT guidance, sexual dysfunction resolution, and performance optimization company. Got a range of different products ranging from the source list. If you need to circumvent your clinic or get any anabolic, including high-potency DHT gel, just get the source list. Is down in the description of this video. My history is in the neuropharmacology of nootropics, particularly consulting CEOs on this. So I built one after 15 years of doing that. It's called Torque, and you can get it down in the description of this video. Lastly, I'm a coach on TRT protocol restructuring. We got one-off calls and protocol regenerations, or ongoing packages for people that have serious sexual dysfunction. You can hire me for any of that stuff in under a minute at livecortex.com. So if you do a simple Google search for TB-500, which is basically the peptide form of a compound that we innately make, but which is useful to take exogenously, called thymosin beta-4, you're going to find, again, it being grouped into the reparative peptides. Like right away, BPC-157 comes up when you search TB-500. The World Anti-Doping Agency has an explanation. Again, people tend to group this in this category, but what I'm going to argue in this video is it should be grouped both in the muscle growth and tissue repair category, but also the pro-erectile category. Again, the World Doping Agency goes, TB-500 claimed to increase muscle growth and tissue repair. The peptide, or TB-500, does promote wound healing, muscle building, and speeds up recovery time of muscle fibers and their cells. One of the primary ways that it does this is by promoting cell migration through a specific interaction with the actin in the cell. Now, one of the things that's really important here, and I think is one of the primary mechanisms by which TB-500 fixes erections or induces better erection quality for men, is that thymosin beta-4, which is, again, the compound from which TB-500 is derived, induces the expression of VEGF, or vascular endothelial growth factor. Now, TB-500 or thymosin beta-4 also stimulates angiogenesis, the production of new blood vessels, but it does so via the induction of vascular endothelial growth factor. Now, interestingly, vascular endothelial growth factor, when injected intracavernosally, so if you inject it into the spongy tissue of the penis, restores erection function in various contexts. This one, through the inhibition of apoptosis in a diabetic rat. They end up saying, to our knowledge, this is the first study to show that intracavernosal injection of VEGF, or vascular endothelial growth factor, restores erectile dysfunction through the inhibition of apoptosis in diabetic rats. So in this particular case, they injected actual raw vascular endothelial growth factor into the cavernosal tissue of a diabetic rat, and it fixed their erection problem. And we know that thymosin beta-4, again, the peptide which is very structurally similar, from which we have TB-500, induces the expression of vascular endothelial growth factor. I went down this rabbit hole because each time I inject TB-500, my fucking erections are rock solid. They just get better from whatever baseline they are. Turns out there's a strong connection here. Now, this might pose the question, could one inject TB-500 intracavernosally? and get vascular endothelial growth factor expression and speed up the recovery process of a downed erectile state? Well, we'll get to that. First, though, more on VEGF and how downed VEGF, lack of VEGF, polymorphisms in vascular endothelial growth factor lead to erectile dysfunction. I mean, the connection is super strong here. The background here is that repeated evidence from animal models suggests a strong link between vascular endothelial growth factor, again, something that TB-500 induces in large quantity, and penile vasculature and erection function, because VEGF can alter physiologic pathways involved in the regulation of penile vasomotor tone. Largely what VEGF does, in addition to facilitating nitric oxide expression through optimizing endothelial nitric oxide synthase, the enzyme that catalyzes nitric oxide in the endothelium, is ultimately these things, if you research them further, is they regulate vasodilation and vasoconstriction. And at its core, an erection is penile vasodilation, right? This is why alprostadil and the other two drugs that make up Trimix, the injectable cavernosal drug, which is an injectable vasodilator, gives men, even with serious erection issues, rock hard erections, right? It just like temporarily fixes their erection problems. That is because you're directly bypassing all the intrapenile mechanisms and you're inducing vasodilation. So ultimately, VEGF and the endothelial system is what forces the vasodilation and vasoconstriction dynamics, heavily in favored in this case of vasodilation relative to the male erection. In this paper, what they ultimately end up concluding is that polymorphisms in the one of the VEGF genes leads to a susceptibility for erectile dysfunction, right? So if that system, again, optimizing the thin lining of the blood vessels is impaired, well, your erections are going to be crappy. Cialis may or may not help. I mean, these things are largely going to be sort of trivial to the outcome of getting an erection. You're going to need to dose high doses of it, and you're going to wonder what the fuck's going on, and everything seems to look right, and your hormones in the right place. Well, you might have a vascular endothelial growth factor problem, which you could probably fix with the use of TB-500. Here's another paper titled Phosphorylated Endothelial Nitric Oxide Synthase. Again, the enzyme that catalyzes nitric oxide mediates VEGF-induced penile erection. So they injected VEGF into these mice in this particular case, and the type of VEGF that they use is VEGF 145, which is a preparation of vascular endothelial growth factor. It significantly increased the erectile responses in the castration mice. I mean, that's hard to fix erection quality in. You know, you need high loads of DHT. You usually need some testosterone and estradiol in that case as well. And you need endothelial nitric oxide synthase, so much that in this case, VEGF wasn't able to completely restore erection function in intact mice that were lacking endothelial nitric oxide synthase. And if you have healthy functioning endothelial cells lining blood vessels, which TB-500 definitely in the literature, really the thymosin beta-4 literature is all we have on this, induces, well, then you have your eNOS. You have your endothelial nitric oxide synthase, which is converting really arginine and citrulline into nitric oxide. But the only way that this happens effectively is if the endothelial cells aren't injured, damaged, impaired, or otherwise downed. And the one thing that we know, aside from muscle repair and tissue repair, etc., but largely mediates tissue repair that TB-500 does, is optimize the endothelium and increase vascular endothelial growth factor. Now, we should talk about dosing. Usually TB-500 comes in a 5 milligram peptide vial, unless you have the source list, at which point you could get 10 milligram peptide vials for cheaper of TB-500. But let's call it, you've got 5 milligrams, you reconstitute it with 2 milliliters of bacteriostatic water, and you're shooting for a dose of 1 milligram. This is the dose that I suggest for people with erection issues to dose, and I would dose this twice a week. 1 milligram of TB-500 twice a week. If you want to break it up in some easy to digest sort of way, or easy to follow way, then just do 1 milligram every 3.5 days. Now, if you reconstitute it this way, 2 milliliters of bacteriostatic water and a 5 milligram vial, and you're dosing 1 milligram, all you would do is take it on an insulin syringe to the 40 mark. That gets you your 1 milligram, or 40 units on any insulin syringe. Ultimately, for a 5 milligram vial, your vial would contain 5 doses, so you'd have to stock stock up on TB-500. But if you're trying to fix erection issues or vascular endothelial growth factor, optimize the thin lining of the blood vessels, which everyone wants to do. Everyone wants to do this. Believe me, the endothelium is the thing that goes wrong in cardiovascular diseases, okay? This is the thing that over time, as you age, you do not want impaired, injured, malfunctioning, or otherwise downed. This is, by the way, the Prime Peptides, no affiliation. I've been using their peptide calculator. You can Google Prime Peptides peptide calculator and find it, but it's actually pretty useful for all matter of peptides, whether you're using TB-500, using BPC-157, or you're using ipamorelin, gonadorelin if you must. Yeah, 1 milligram twice a week, every 3.5 days is a good start. If you find that you might need to increase the dose because you're getting some positive benefits on erectile function, but you would like to see if there are further benefits, then I would go to 2 milligrams twice a week. I really don't think that you're going to run into any serious side effects by increasing vascular endothelial growth factor and optimizing the endothelium of blood vessels. Now let's talk about intracavernosal injections of TB-500. Now, unfortunately, there aren't many. I don't really think there are any anecdotals on this. I think through searching on Reddit, I found one of a person that injected TB-500 and or BPC-157 into the cavernosal tissue and didn't run into any problems and did seem to report better erection function. But let's go to this thread. Can we inject BPC-157, which may work for improving erection function considering its reparative potential, or TB-500 into the penis for tissue repair? Now, one guy goes, these peptides are not location specific. They work by triggering your brain and circulatory system to produce more blood vessels to aid healing. While that's partially true, BPC-157 generally is locally specific, meaning you inject it on site subcutaneously, typically on an injury. Now, we think of TB-500 to be more systemic, but we also think of dihydrotestosterone to be more systemic. But people put 20% or 3% DHT gel on the shaft and get either penile growth or enhancements in erection quality. So to some degree, if you were to inject TB-500 at your own risk into the cavernosal tissues, I really don't think anything super negative would happen. Some degree of that would probably go locally, meaning you'd have TB-500 locally in the tissues to execute its positive reparative effects on the male organ. Now, then, therefore, because of blood vessels, it's going to go systemic and it'll try to reach wherever in your physiology that it feels it might need to optimize endothelial function, hopefully cardiac system, which is obviously a good thing. But, you've got this anecdotal, which, we take anecdotals a little bit with a grain of salt, but it's just informative and something interesting to know. This guy goes, I'm not a medical doctor, but I do know a guy who does BPC-157 injected into the base of the penis, and he swears by it. You can look it up. Use a small insulin syringe and do it at the 10 or 2 o'clock. That's actually good advice, because if you think about how you inject anything into the male organ, mainly trimix, the injectable vasodilators, you do it at basically the 10 or the 2 o'clock. So it's already lending credence to this anecdotal because that's exactly where you would do it intracavernosal injections. There are illustrations that show you how. For reference, he's 55 and says he feels like 18 again. Does it every time before he goes on a date. Good luck. Now, I see this working. I see both TB-500 and BPC-157 able to induce erections in an acute fashion. I also see them both able to restore erections when dosed on a like sort of an ongoing basis on a routine. Whether or not you want to inject in the organ, I mean, again, we only have these anecdotals here. Hey, I just tried this. We'll see if it works. Surprisingly not painful. There's enough sources saying site-specific works. If systemic, doesn't matter when you inject it, so why not? So it is possible. My take on that is probably do a little more research, right? Understanding that if you're going to do an intracavernosal injection, there might be risks associated with that. Probably not some significant negative outcome. I mean, the only negative outcome that could come potentially from injecting these in the male organ is priapism, which would be an ongoing erection similar to what you would see when you take melatonin 2 or PT-141 in very, very high doses. I think the bottom line here is that sometimes we look in the wrong places when we're looking looking to fix erection function. We look specifically at nitric oxide. Just like, oh, I'll take some citrulline, or I'll take some arginine, or I'll eat some fucking watermelon or some beetroots, and then that's going to magically help. Well, I mean, if you can't actually synthesize the nitric oxide from the endothelium, well, then yeah, those things are really not going to help your erections. And again, vasodilation, which is induced by or largely influenced by vascular tone, which is influenced by the health of the endothelium, which gets optimized by thymosin beta 4, which is the peptide that TB-500 is structurally similar to and is derived from. That's a probable way to address at the root erection issues. Experiment wisely. I've been doing this research for a couple months. I've seen some pretty fucking interesting results myself, which prompted me to go and do this research. I have not moved on to clients with heavy ED because we're largely using hormones to target that. But if a case opens up where we need to do that, I will keep you guys posted. But this is food for thought. I wanted to keep you guys in the loop on what's going on in my brain and in my research. All right, boys, as I said at the beginning, yeah, Cortex Labs is a TRT guided sexual dysfunction resolution and performance optimization company. I got a range of different products. The most popular product right now, hands down, is the Source List. I mean, you're getting things that you might need to circumvent your clinic to get. Like, they're not going to prescribe you Anavar if you might need it. They're not going to prescribe you a non-aromatizable androgen and some estradiol if you just can't dial in and you need to dial in to have erections and libido and well-being and all this stuff. At the same time, you can't get DHT gel 20% or 3% anywhere except the Source List. Proviron, Testable esters, anything you can think of is on the Source List. Get it down in the description of this video. It's 20% off right now. In fact, everything is, including the Torque Stack. Again, I built this. This is my brainchild. My whole history was in consulting CEOs on brain performance using nootropics. At the end of that, I built one. It's very powerful. It's also 20% off. You can find it down in the description of this video. Lastly, coaching is 20% off. We never do this. If there's discounts on other shit, there's never discounts on coaching. Whether it's a one-off call with me on TRT protocol restructuring, where I'll redesign your protocol, give you further adjustments after the first protocol that I give you, or ongoing sexual dysfunction takes 3 or 6 months, ideally 6 months. If you have the budget for that stuff and you're a serious individual and you don't want to fuck around, hire me. It takes about a minute, and we're on the fact-finding call as soon as tomorrow. livecortex.com. All right. Brother, been an absolute pleasure hanging out with you. Hope you had a great week so far. Hope you guys are ready for the spring. Please like the video. It makes a huge difference. If you do me any favor from all the content that I put out, just hit the like button. Sub to the channel. Many more breakdowns on this, HRT, HRT+, TRT optimization, hormones, sexual function for men, host of other things. Sub to this channel. I'd love to have you here. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of your week. Live stream coming Saturday, 9 a.m. Eastern time. Be there. I will see you there. And boys, I'll talk to you guys in the next one.